In a small town near the wild rivers of Alaska, Thora Pine lived alone in her wooden cabin. At 68 years old, she spent most of her time watching the wild animals that came down from the mountains. What made her different from other people in the town was her way with injured animals. Over the years, she had helped many bears, wolves, and eagles get back to health. One cold morning in October, Thora woke up to loud barking outside her cabin. She put on her thick coat and walked out to find Kenzo, her 5-year-old Alaskan Malamute, standing at the edge of the river. Kenzo wasn't the type of dog that barked without reason. He was calm and quiet, which made this behavior very strange. "What is it, boy?" Thora asked, walking closer to the river. The water was moving fast due to the heavy rains from last week. Kenzo kept barking and looking at something downstream. Thora followed Kenzo along the riverbank. The morning was cold, and she could see her breath in the air. After walking for about 10 minutes, she saw what had gotten Kenzo so worried. There, stuck between two large rocks, was a young moose. The animal was trying hard to keep its head above water, but the current was too strong. "Oh no," Thora said. She knew that trying to help a moose could be dangerous. Adult moose were very strong and could hurt people easily. But this one was young, probably separated from its mother during the heavy rains. Thora ran back to her cabin as fast as her old legs could carry her. She grabbed some rope and called the local wildlife rescue center. "This is Thora Pine. There's a young moose stuck in the river near my cabin. It needs help right away." While waiting for help, Thora went back to the river with the rope. The moose was getting tired, and its movements were becoming slower. Kenzo stayed close to Thora, watching the moose carefully. Soon, a truck pulled up near the cabin. Out jumped Raven Blackwood, the head of the wildlife rescue team. She was in her 40s with long black hair tied back in a braid. Behind her came 2 more rescue workers carrying equipment. "How long has it been in there?" Raven asked, putting on her water gear. "At least 30 minutes that I know of," Thora answered. "It's getting weaker." The rescue team worked quickly. They secured ropes to trees on both sides of the river. Raven, attached to a safety line, went into the cold water. The current was strong, but she managed to reach the young moose. The animal was scared but too tired to fight. Raven got a rope around its body, and the team on shore started pulling. Slowly, the moose moved away from the rocks. Once it was free from the rocks, the current pushed it toward the riverbank where the team was ready. As soon as the moose was on solid ground, it tried to stand up but fell. Its legs were shaking from cold and effort. Thora noticed cuts on its side where the rocks had scraped against it. "We need to warm it up," Raven said, taking off her wet gear. "And check those cuts. But we can't do it here. It needs to go to the rescue center." The team had brought a trailer for large animals. Getting the young moose into it wasn't easy, but they managed with everyone's help. Before they left, Raven turned to Thora. "Would you like to come with us? We could use your experience with injured animals." Thora nodded. She went inside her cabin to get her medical kit, the one she used for treating wild animals. Kenzo jumped into the truck with her, and they followed the trailer to the rescue center. The rescue center was a large building at the edge of town with several outdoor enclosures for different animals. They took the moose to the warm indoor area where they could treat it. After drying the animal, Thora helped clean and bandage its cuts while Raven checked for other injuries. "It's a female," Raven said, "probably about 6 months old. She's lucky you and Kenzo found her when you did." While they worked, Thora noticed something unusual about the young moose. Most wild animals were afraid of humans, but this one seemed different. It watched them with calm eyes, especially Thora. When she put medicine on its cuts, it didn't try to move away. "I've never seen a wild moose this calm," Raven said, thinking the same thing. "It's like she knows we're trying to help." They gave the moose warm water with minerals to help it recover from being in the cold river. Thora stayed at the rescue center all day, watching over the young animal. She named her River because of where they found her. That evening, when Thora was getting ready to leave, River tried to stand up again. This time she managed to stay on her feet, though she was still shaky. She walked over to where Thora was standing and gently bumped her nose against Thora's hand. "Well, look at that," Raven said, smiling. "She's thanking you. Will she be okay here?" Thora asked, patting River's neck. "We'll keep her until she's fully healed. Then we'll try to find her mother. Moose families usually stay in the same area. If we can't find her mother, we'll release her when she's strong enough to survive on her own." On the drive home, Thora couldn't stop thinking about River. There was something special about that young moose. Kenzo seemed to think so too. He had stayed close to River the whole time they were at the rescue center. The next morning, Thora woke up early. She made herself some coffee and looked out her window at the river. The water was still moving fast, but not as bad as yesterday. She was about to turn away when she saw something that made her stop. Standing at the edge of her property was a large female moose. It was looking toward her cabin with ears forward, as if waiting for something. "Kenzo," Thora called softly. "Look." The dog came to the window and let out a low whine. They both knew who this was. River's mother had found them. Thora watched the mother moose through her window. The large animal stood still, looking at the cabin. Kenzo stayed quiet beside Thora, which was unusual for him. Normally he would bark at any wild animal near the cabin. "We need to tell Raven," Thora said, reaching for her phone. She called the rescue center, and Raven picked up on the second ring. "River's mother is here," Thora said. "She's standing right outside my cabin." "Stay inside," Raven replied. "We'll be there in 20 minutes. This could be our chance to reunite them." While waiting for the rescue team, Thora noticed something else. More moose were coming out of the forest. They gathered behind River's mother, 3 females and 2 younger ones. They all stood quietly, looking at the cabin. "It's her family group," Thora whispered to Kenzo. She had never seen anything like this. Moose usually stayed in small family groups, but they rarely came this close to human homes. When Raven arrived with her team, she was amazed by what she saw. "This is not normal behavior," she said, looking at the group of moose. "They're not afraid of us at all." The mother moose watched as the rescue truck parked. She took a few steps toward them, then stopped. It was like she was waiting for something. "I think we should bring River here," Thora said. "They came looking for her." Raven agreed. She sent one of her team members back to the rescue center to get River. While they waited, the mother moose and her family stayed where they were. They didn't run away when more people from the town started showing up to see what was happening. Zeb Tucker, the town's oldest resident at 85, came up to Thora. "In all my years here, I've never seen moose act like this," he said, leaning on his walking stick. "My grandfather used to say that animals around these rivers were different, that they were smarter, that they understood things we didn't." An hour later, the trailer with River arrived. As soon as they opened the trailer door, the mother moose made a low sound. River, who was much stronger now, walked out slowly. When she saw her mother, she moved faster. Everyone watched as mother and baby came together. The mother moose checked River all over, touching the bandages with her nose. Then, something even more surprising happened. The mother moose walked toward Thora, River following behind her. "Don't move," Raven whispered, but Thora wasn't afraid. The mother moose stopped a few feet from her and lowered her head slightly. River came up and bumped Thora's hand like she had done at the rescue center. "They're thanking you," Zeb said softly. "Just like my grandfather's stories." After that moment, the moose family turned and walked toward the forest. River looked back once at Thora before following her family into the trees. Everyone stood quiet for a while, knowing they had seen something special. That evening, Thora sat on her porch with Kenzo, thinking about what had happened. Raven came by after finishing her work at the rescue center. "The other rescue centers won't believe this," Raven said, sitting next to Thora. "Moose don't behave like this. They don't come looking for their young ones near human homes. They don't thank people." "Maybe Zeb is right," Thora said. "Maybe there is something different about the animals here." That night, Thora couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about River and her family, about how the mother moose had gathered her whole family group to come look for River. Around midnight, she heard Kenzo get up from his bed. The dog went to the window and made a soft sound. Thora got up to look. In the moonlight, she saw shapes moving near the river. The moose family was back. They weren't coming toward the cabin this time. Instead, they were drinking from the river, calm and peaceful, as if they knew this was a safe place. Over the next few weeks, Thora often saw River and her family near her cabin. They never came as close as they had on that first day, but they didn't run away when they saw her either. Other animals started coming more often too. Foxes would sit near her porch, eagles would land on her roof, and even a young bear would sometimes watch her from the edge of the forest. Word spread about what had happened with River. People from other towns started coming to see the place where Moose had thanked a human. Some didn't believe the story, but those who lived in the town had seen it with their own eyes. One morning, Thora found Raven at her door. The rescue worker looked worried. "We need your help," Raven said. "Something's happening in the forest. Animals are acting strange." "Strange how?" Thora asked, putting on her coat. "They're all moving, lots of them, heading toward the mountains. But it's too early for their usual migration. And it's not just one type of animal, it's all of them. Bears, moose, wolves, even the birds. Something's making them leave. Thora looked toward the river. The water was normal, flowing like it always did. But Kenzo was acting nervous, walking back and forth near the door. When did this start? Thora asked. Early this morning. One of our tracking teams saw it first, a large group of animals moving together. We've never seen different species migrate together like this. We need to find out why. Thora grabbed her backpack, the one she always kept ready for following animal tracks. Let me get Kenzo's harness. We'll go with you. As they got into Raven's truck, Thora saw something that made her heart stop. River and her family were walking past her cabin, heading toward the mountains. River looked at her as they passed, and Thora was sure she saw worry in the young moose's eyes. Something's wrong, Thora said. The animals know something we don't. They drove toward the mountain road, following the trail of moving animals. More rescue workers and forest rangers were already there, watching and taking notes. The sight was amazing, bears walking near deer, wolves passing by moose without trying to hunt them. All of them heading in the same direction. Look at the sky, Raven said, pointing up. Large groups of birds were flying over them, eagles, ravens, geese, and smaller birds all mixed together. They were all flying toward the mountains too. Kenzo was getting more nervous. He kept pulling toward the mountains, trying to follow the animals. Thora had never seen him act like this. We need to follow them, she said. Kenzo knows something. He's trying to tell us. Just then, Thora's phone rang. It was Zeb. Thora, the old man's voice was shaking. You need to see this. Come to my house right away. My grandfather's journals, I found something you need to know. Thora and Raven drove quickly to Zeb's house. The old man lived in a small cabin filled with books and old papers. When they arrived, he was sitting at his kitchen table with an old leather journal open in front of him. Look at this, Zeb said, pointing to a page filled with faded handwriting. My grandfather wrote this 60 years ago. He wrote about something just like this, all the animals moving together toward the mountains. Thora read the old journal entry while Raven looked over her shoulder. The writing described how animals had suddenly started moving together, just like they were doing now. But what caught Thora's attention was what came next. 3 days after the animals left, she read out loud, the river flooded. Not like normal floods, this was different. The water came so fast that if the animals hadn't left, they would have all died. That's why they're leaving now, Raven said. They know it's going to flood again. Kenzo barked at the window. Outside, more animals were passing by Zeb's house, all heading toward higher ground. Thora saw River and her family among them. We need to warn the town, Thora said. If this flood is anything like what happened 60 years ago, people need to get ready. Raven was already on her phone, calling the town officials. Zeb kept reading through his grandfather's journal, looking for more information about the flood. Here's something else, he said. My grandfather wrote that before the flood, the ground felt different. Like it was moving a little bit. Just then they felt it, a small shake in the ground. It wasn't strong enough to knock anything over, but they all felt it. That's it, Thora said. That's what the animals felt. There must be something happening underground that's going to make the river flood. They drove to the town hall where people were already gathering. News about the animals had spread, and now with the ground shaking, everyone was worried. The mayor, Vale Norton, was trying to keep people calm. Thora showed the mayor Zeb's grandfather's journal. After reading it, Vale called for everyone's attention. Listen up, he said. We need to get ready for a possible flood. It might be nothing, but we're going to be safe. Everyone needs to pack important things and be ready to move to higher ground. Some people didn't believe it. They said it was crazy to listen to an old journal and some animals. But most remembered the story of River and her family, how the animals had shown they were different here. Raven's rescue team started helping people get ready. They brought trucks to help move older people like Zeb up to the high school, which was on a hill. Thora went back to her cabin to pack some things, but she couldn't stop watching the river. The water was still normal, but now she noticed something new. Small bubbles were coming up in places where the water was usually calm. The ground shook again, stronger this time. Kenzo started barking at the river. Thora saw what worried him. The water was starting to turn brown. She grabbed her phone to call Raven, but before she could, she heard a loud sound from up the river. Thora ran outside and looked upstream. What she saw made her freeze. A wall of water was coming down the river, much bigger than any flood she had ever seen. The ground must have broken somewhere up in the mountains, releasing underground water. Everyone get up to the high school. Thora yelled, running to her truck. She drove through town, warning everyone she saw. The flood was coming faster than anyone had expected. Thanks to the animals' warning and Zeb's grandfather's journal, everyone in town had time to get to safety. They watched from the high school as the water filled the valley. Houses near the river were damaged, but no one was hurt. Thora stood with Kenzo watching the flood. Raven came to stand next to her. "The animals knew," Raven said. "They tried to warn us just like they warned their own families." "River knew," Thora added. "That's why she looked at me that way when they passed by. She was trying to tell me to follow them." For 3 days, the town stayed on high ground while the flood slowly went down. When they could finally return to their homes, they found a changed valley. The river had made new paths in places, and many trees had fallen. But thanks to the animals, both wild and tame, no lives were lost. Thora's cabin had some water damage, but it was still standing. As she cleaned up, she kept looking for signs of the animals returning. A week after the flood, she woke up to Kenzo barking happily. Outside, River and her family had returned. They were the first animals to come back to the valley. River walked right up to Thora's porch, now fully grown but still gentle. Behind her family, other animals were returning too: the bears, the foxes, even the eagles in the sky. That day, the town had a meeting. They decided to create a new rule. From now on, they would pay more attention to the animals. If the animals acted strange, people would take it seriously. They also decided to protect more of the forest and river area, giving the animals safe places to live. Raven's Rescue Center was given more money to help injured animals, and they started teaching young people about the special connection between the town and its wild neighbors. Thora continued living in her cabin by the river. Every morning, she would sit on her porch with Kenzo and watch the animals. River and her family often came by, and sometimes River's own babies would play near the cabin. The story of how the animals saved the town spread far and wide. Some people didn't believe it, but those who lived there knew the truth. They had learned that sometimes the best warnings come not from machines or computers, but from the wild creatures who share our world. Years later, Thora would tell visiting children about River, about the flood, and about how animals and humans learned to trust each other in their small town by the wild river. And if they looked carefully, they might see a moose watching from the trees, gentle and wise, keeping an eye on the town that had become part of her family. "Remember," Thora would tell them, "in this valley, the animals are more than just animals. They're our neighbors, our protectors, and sometimes, if we're lucky, they become our friends."